Around early 2026, if you're following the news around chip technology, you may have heard this.
China has reportedly started making its own advanced chip-making machines for domestic chip producers, according to media outlet The Information. Their reporting says China has begun to make lithography machines which print chip patterns onto silicon wafers. These include both deep ultraviolet or DUV and extreme ultraviolet or EUV systems. Dutch manufacturer ASML has long dominated both kinds of lithography. The company's shares dropped 4.6% following the report. But China's new systems are reportedly still behind ASML on performance and reliability. The move comes as China tries to build its own chip-making ecosystem as US restrictions limit access to advanced tools.
So, as the news suggests, China has begun mass production of its first fully domestic immersion deep ultraviolet lithography machine, or in short, the DUV, with initial units slated for delivery to semiconductor giants SMIC, Huahong, and CXMT. The story, shared on Reddit's Art Technology forum, ignited a sprawling conversation that quickly moved beyond the technical specifications of 28 nanometer mode printing and multi-patterning tricks. What emerged was an interesting discussion on technological catch-up, geopolitical coercion, and the shifting psychological terrain of global power. Now, this new development is a significant step, but it is definitely not the finish line. The company leading this effort is a little known Shanghai state owned firm called Aishengna Electronic Technology Group. Most people had never heard of them until last week. They were setting up since 2023 with about $1 billion in registered capital from Shanghai state entities, and they have quietly absorbed teams from some of China's top lithography startups, including people from Yuliang Sheng, which is Huawei Linked Packing, and Shanghai Microelectronics Equipment, or SMEE. According to the sources familiar with this matter, Aishengna is already in production. The plan is roughly 5 machines this year and around 20 in 2027. Those first units are expected to go to China's big chip makers, the SMIC, Huahong, and the memory chip maker Changxing Memory Technologies, or CXMT. But why does this milestone actually matter? Now, China right now is not trying to beat Western lithography machines or the companies on price or pure performance in any sense, but China is making sure that no foreign government can simply cut off its access to the tools that build modern chips, which have become crucial in everyday electronics to sensitive sectors like defense and space exploration. The sanctions that blocked ASML's most advanced systems from Chinese factories did not kill China's semiconductor ambitions. They technically supercharged them. One might expect that if there are sanctions on a country, they might fail in developing technologies of cutting edge or achieve any big breakthroughs at all. But this is not the first time China has faced this. Back when Cold War was going on, the United States barred China from participating in the International Space Station project and actively purged their own space industry people of Chinese origin, just because of ego and harbored feelings of resentment against China. However, China overcame it and now has their own space station in the orbit. Returning to semiconductors, for years Beijing was fine letting Taiwan handle the most cutting edge production as it was convenient. Then the export controls under both Biden and Trump administrations turned the convenience into a national security crisis. In response, China did massive sustained state-directed investments to develop the chip ecosystem that most market-driven Western capitalist countries simply don't do. A recurring theme in the whole discussion was the distinct nature of China's developmental model. One long comment drew direct parallel to electric vehicles. For over a decade, Beijing funneled resources into EV manufacturing capacity indifferent to near-term profitability until it saturated its domestic market. Now the excess spills outward, upending the global auto industry through price wars that Western manufacturers simply cannot match. The same logic is applied to semiconductors. China is willing to eat the costs of inefficient multi-patterning, low yields, and uncompetitive economics for as long as it takes to build a fully domestic ecosystem. When the government sees chip self-sufficiency as a pillar of national security, market logic like profitability, optimization, shareholder returns becomes a secondary concern. This is not a flaw of the Chinese approach to engineering, but it has proven to be the model that is outperforming any other developmental model across the world. The thread then broadened into a comparison of national priorities. If China values engineering over lawyering, the West, particularly the United States, has increasingly incentivized its brightest minds to flock into finance, law, software platforms that optimize advertising clicks. The declining prestige of STEM education in the US, the crushing weight of student debt, and the spectacle of a political class more preoccupied with cultural warfare and self enrichment than laying the foundations of long term industrial competitiveness is one of the key reasons why the US is lagging in this race. Reflecting on rare earth supply chains, it must also be noted that China is perhaps the only country which has dedicated degree programs in rare earth mineral processing, a domain the West has willingly ceded because it was environmentally messy and economically thin margined. This shows the importance of core sciences and engineering in the development of a society. The West may have given up on its previous motivations to pursue sciences and produce some of the best breakthroughs in the 20th century, and that place is gradually being taken by China, where from the very colleges, universities, the course curriculum, the policies, and the strategy for securing dominance over key emerging industries is being rewritten. Apart from the engineering and the sciences behind the whole chip war, at its core, it is indeed a contest of two contrasting political themes: socialism and capitalism. Now, some might argue that whatever China has achieved is because of capitalism, but then the question arises that why the temple of capitalism and democracy, the United States of America, has been lagging in these key sectors such as housing, education, healthcare, and eventually the technology space. Several comments dissected the current US administration's capture by private interests, the hollowing out of independent oversight, and the installation of unqualified loyalists atop critical agencies. One particularly detailed comment traced how a decades long project to fill the federal judiciary with ideologically groomed judges has, in conjunction with the compliant legislature, dismantled the guardrails that once constrained executive power. The result is a system in which the ultra elite rewrite the rules of the world and the ordinary citizens have no seat at the table. This is the present day United States, and largely the West as a whole is slowly descending into a phase where growth and breakthroughs are indeed reducing because of this. A lot of universities in China are now slowly emerging towards the top of the QS ranking lists. It must be remembered that a lot of these universities in the United States are far older than the universities in China, and China, along with the whole of Asia, has been the victim of colonialism, brutal exploitation by Western imperialism. The resurgence of these Chinese universities in the domain of research outputs shows that the winds are changing, and the United States might not be the uncontested power that it had expected to be since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The very sanctions meant to slow China's ascent have, by Beijing's own framing, forced it to build a parallel technological stack. America's instinct is to block rather than outcompete. This is what the West has done to the Third World and its colonies since the Industrial Revolution. But the times of change have indeed arrived, and there is hope that there would be a multipolar world in the coming 100 years. In this whole discussion, which I read in the Reddit thread, it was more of a technical debrief, but it was also a raw, uncurated snapshot of a world which is going through a major transition. The old narrative in which liberal capitalist democracies hold a permanent monopoly on high innovation is finally cracking. The new reality is one in which a determined, competent government can build its own lighthouse in the fog of sanctions. The commentator's reflections were tinged with fear, sarcasm, geopolitical fatalism, and occasional defensive humor. But above all, they carried a recognition. The question is no longer if China will catch up, but how the West will adapt to a world in which the technological high ground is shared between multiple powers, and often contested and perhaps eventually ceded to other powers. The thread's last comment is China rising and America falling. This might sound good like a slogan, but it captures an emotional truth that has already seeped from the forums into the policy rooms, and from there into the future.